With us, we have some breaking news coming in. A statement from the Russian delegation, where Russian envoy Dmitriev has said that upcoming talks aim to restore US-Russia relations and not just address the economy. He added the discussions will take in the full spectrum of bilateral issues, not just limited to Ukraine. Dmitriev described the mood ahead of the Putin-Trump summit as combative. We're now joined by anchor and correspondent Joshua Barnes to give us further context on this statement from one of Vladimir Putin's delegation. Joshua, the context behind these comments?
Well, yes, absolutely, Thomas. Of course, there is a lot set to be discussed at these meetings, which we've heard may last up to 7 hours. Of course, Donald Trump's flight out of Alaska set to go at around 5:45 p.m. That would give us potentially 7 hours of discussions. And there is a lot to look at here. Of course, sanctions have been a big comment from the United States throughout recent weeks. Threats of sanctions, secondary sanctions as well. And there are, of course, going to be conversations about the economic ties between Russia and the US in the face of instability. But this situation as well could involve safety and defense and geopolitical security. Let's look at recent action from the US president and his administration. He moved 2 nuclear submarines to within what he called a reasonable area within sort of range of Russia. This was, of course, seen as a provocative move, but Russia themselves have spoken about potential use of nuclear weapons throughout this conflict. Now, whether that's just been rhetoric to try and scare the West and Ukraine and Western allies or not, there is definitely a boiling point of tensions here involving both Russia and the US at the core. So discussions around a potential nuclear deal, with their current nuclear deal set to end next year, that is expected. And of course, conversations on Ukraine as well. But Russia posing this as a real bilateral meeting with loads of different ramifications and not just a Ukraine peace summit. It'll be interesting to get some reactions from, of course, European leaders who are really concerned about how this might leave Ukraine after the summit, given there have been security guarantees from the US, but we know how Donald Trump can often make statements that change depending on who he has spoken to. So a lot to discuss, lots of senior officials from both countries set to discuss so many different topics, but on the agenda, of course, mainly the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We look forward to bringing you all the updates as we get them.
Thank you very much, Josh, for providing that context. We now move over to Rabinder Sachdev. Rabinder, your reaction to that statement from the Kremlin saying that these talks are not just for a Russia-Ukraine peace deal, but are in fact they aim to establish better Russian-American ties. Do you think that the Trump administration and the American people will be pleased with an outcome there?
Thank you. I'll take that up, but with your permission, I'll go back to what Professor Popovsky was saying regarding a ceasefire. In fact, yesterday, my think tank, we have put out a press release. We've sent it to the White House also. We've sent it to Reuters and all also, saying that if Trump can enable a 30-day ceasefire immediately in this summit, guns falling silent, we propose that he be nominated for the Gandhi Peace Prize. Non-violence, Gandhi, 30 days, well, we could do that. I mean, India could consider, at least my think tank, we will kind of move this nomination if we can. 30 days ceasefire in this meeting. But yes, the chances of that are low, but let us see. Now, coming to what the Russian delegation is saying, yeah, I mean, there are 2 tracks happening here. Russia-Ukraine whole equation and formula is one thing, but for Putin, number one or first is overall Russia-America relations. In a sense that great powers, let us divide the world between us. This is my area of influence, this is your area of influence. Embassies are opening up. It was announced, I think, the US and Russia are both kind of, reviving the embassies and missions in Washington, D.C. and Moscow. some of that opening up, some discussions on exploration of the Arctic, some discussions on the potential of the Siberian, oil fields, minerals and all, etc., and many such. So for Russia, that is the first element. And then, of course, like removal of sanctions on Russia so that Russia is back into the Committee of Nations. So that's one. And then second, yes, Ukraine is Ukraine is the issue, no doubt. But the Russians would first want to kind of, layer up a normalization or a progress or a working situation with the United States in terms of Russia-US relations and global affairs. And then move on to, not then move on, maybe it will be happening in parallel, but this would definitely be, there would be these two tracks of discussions.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, I wanted to bring you back in here. We've had mixed messages throughout the week in what this summit is really going to be about. We've heard previously Donald Trump state that there would be discussions about swapping territories, to then later on saying this is a simple listening exercise about what Russia does actually want from this conflict in order to achieve a longer peace. What do you think Donald Trump could offer Putin that Zelensky would accept, especially now we've heard that this, a third angle to this, which is that talks are here to restore US-Russia ties and not a long-term peace deal for Russia-Ukraine solely?
Yes, Thomas, I fully agree with what also Ravinder Sajdev said, that Russians will try to avoid the talk on Ukraine and move to global issues, to bilateral relations, to trading, because all of this legitimizes Putin in power, makes him looking good, somebody who is normal, who can be trusted and so on. So the Russians will say, Ukraine is just one of the many, many, many topics in the agenda, and they will try to avoid any commitment on Ukraine. Now, on your question, over the last week, we've seen very different messages, but by the way, this is very normal for the White House. For the last 7 months, we hear different messages every week. They change their mind every week. So there is nothing surprising there. But the meeting, the video conference which Donald Trump had with the European leaders on Wednesday, and after that we've seen no talks at all about territorial swaps, already mean that he was firmly told by President Macron, by Keir Starmer, by Friedrich Merz, and by the Europeans, that he should not talk at all about territory. And because of that, we've seen no such a language anymore. And Donald Trump reduced his ambition as to say, I will simply listen to what Russians want, which is very clear what Russia wants. It's no secret at all what Russia wants. What Russia wants is to destroy Ukraine as a state and to make it as a puppet government, which they can control. That's the ultimate goal of Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. For that matter, he will never agree to withdraw, he will never stop the fire, and he will continue with his imperialist agenda. By the way, Russia has no way to get out of this conflict, because there will be a lot of questions to Putin himself why he get into this conflict in the first place. Those questions he cannot answer. Why he lost 1 million Russian soldiers in a useless war where Russia achieved nothing. And nobody will accept any territorial swaps. Ukraine is very firm. All the European partners are very firm. 80% of the world is very firm. It's international law, it's United Nations Charter.
Okay.
Countries should not be allowed, never, with aggression, with war crimes, to get a kilometer of extra territory. And that's what the international law is about. Okay. And Donald Trump should tell exactly this to Vladimir Putin. Stop the fire, get out of Ukraine, and only then we can talk about everything else. We can talk about bilateral relations,
yes,
trade, opening ambassadors, and everything else. But first of all, stop the fire, get your troops out of Ukraine, and that's when we become normal partners.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, we have some further information for our audience.